What's happening, so fam? So I was sitting earlier this morning, just kind of like chilling and trying to like think of things that are tied to this month where I'm channeling Osiris and all of his like death transformation energy. And I'm like, death is something that's really hard for people to like overcome, right? How have I overcome death? Well, number one, I've actually physically died multiple times, and I that's when it first hit me like, whoa, I've actually physically forced myself to die in many different aspects, and I have a ton of different stories. I was like about 6 years old. I took a saw and I cut like an extension cord. When I cut that extension cord, half of the shed blew up, and there was a cloud of smoke. No one knew that I was back there, and they just saw me running through the smoke totally unharmed, right? So that's one really good example of like when I've died. I've had other experiences where I've gone through a shamanic ritual of death. I've even gone as far as to force myself to die, right? I had an experience where I was really trying to understand death, and I was taking a certain kind of psychedelic known as Hawaiian wood rose. Some Hawaiian wood rose have a pesticide on them, so I didn't know that about it, being all of like 18, 19. I took these Hawaiian wood rose, I got really super sick, and I even felt like there were moments where I was gonna die, and I was telling my friend, hey, like I'm like, call 911, I think I'm dying, like I can't breathe, I can't focus. And my friend never like actually wanted to call the cops because he was afraid. So it was in that moment where I had to like say, okay, well, if this is my last trip and this is where I died, this is where it was supposed to happen. And that's a really twisted idea for a lot of people to grasp, but that's literally what I've had to do. I went through 8 days ceremony of death where you lock yourself in rather a cave or a room, a really huge venue room, and you don't have food or water for 8 days, and you're in complete total darkness for 8 days. That's something that a lot of shamans end up doing. And I've even gone as far as to confront my fears directly. I've faced things that have to do with death directly. I remember there was a long time ago where I was probably like 19 or 20, and I was like, okay, like my totem animal is the falcon, and like I'm afraid of the idea of free falling and stuff like that. And I'm like, but if my totem and my powers come from being a falcon, I need to understand what it's like to be a falcon, right? And I decided to fight my fears and go on a skydiving trip. I did the skydiving, and I remember one of the last things that I thought right before I'm about to jump off the plane is like, if this is the last thing I get to do, like at least I'm gonna enjoy every moment of being able to see reality from this perspective, and I'm gonna allow myself to completely connect to the falcon totem. And if this is my last moment, because there are accidents that happen, right? Accidents, then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna give myself to that moment. I'm gonna give myself to that power. I'm gonna give myself to that. That is the ultimate bridge between life and death, right? Is being in that moment. And I went skydiving, and I just remember feeling like this serenity. I was able to let go of the world because I chose to do something that was not only super scary to me, but something that was like, I might not come back from this. And I've had many experiences like that where similar to that skydiving thing, where like I've been in positions where I've literally rather been forced to look at death in the eye, or I've forced myself to look death in the eyes and be like, okay, like, life is death, death is life, death is only transformation from one life to another. Like, if I'm supposed to die right now, I'm supposed to die right now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna jump in front of a train and say like, save me, divine power. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying like, if I can control to some level my own fear of my own death, then I can expand my awareness on death. A lot of times people are just like, they're not willing to take themselves out of their comfort zone to experience an understanding beyond their understanding. And like, maybe you've been there, you know, like where you've had moments where you're like, oh my God, maybe this is the last, like these near death experiences, right? Maybe this is it. Like I'm about to die in this moment, you know? When you've had those thoughts, and I've had them in positive lights where I've been able to control them, and negative lights where it seemed like victimization from the 3D perspective. I've had both where I've been able to look at death and be like, this is the moment, like what's gonna happen? If this is what's supposed to happen, it's going to happen. Am I going to let this happen? Like, what is this moment right now? And like completely detaching from everything else other than that moment of like life and death. When you're in that moment, you're so like powerful because you can harness all of your energy into the present. And that's what you can really manifest. Like regardless of, you know, I'm not saying put yourself in danger. I'm not saying doing any of that, but if you have the opportunity where you notice like, hey, it terrifies me to even think about jumping in a cage with a bunch of sharks, you know what I mean? And like having a controlled scenario for that. If that terrifies you, do it. Force yourself to do it. Go schedule that appointment, do the training, get in the cage, watch the sharks swim around you. All right? That is going to be something that's like really powerful, because then you literally are staring not only your shadow, your fear, but death in the face. And then when you come out of that, you know, you're just like reborn. You're like rebirthed. There's a new version of you, and you're like, I just can't believe I did that. Who is that? I'm definitely grown. I'm bigger than what I went into this originally, right? And it's a very powerful experience that you should definitely force yourself to experience. A lot of shamans do this around the world where they embrace death in some fashion, right? A lot of times when you do psychedelics, like something like ayahuasca, you'll have like a spiritual death. But your spiritual rebirth doesn't always have to be like on a psychedelic. It doesn't always have to be when like some sort of like victimization in the 3D happens to you. Like it can literally be something that you self-impose on yourself and you choose to dive into it. Like my entire life I've been obsessed with death, and I haven't really shared that with a lot of people unless you knew me, but a lot of my powers originally were all concentrated and trained around death. And like understanding how the afterlife works, how dead people work, what are the rules of being in the afterlife, and like how far you can take it, you know what I mean? It's been one of those things that's really powerful where like I've always been surrounded by death. I've always been understanding that death is like this constant vibration that we're always breathing. But like death from one perception is like the Grim Reaper form of death where like it's coming for you. You can't escape it, right? But at the same level, death can be that moment of like, oh, whoa, I didn't understand that. Just a portion of me just died just with that last download. Oh my God. That can be death, right? You can even take death as saying like, hey, I've always been afraid of spiders. You know what I mean? I've always been afraid of snakes. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let a snake. I literally did this. Like I was terrified of snakes, and I let a snake stand on my arm, like lay on my arm for all like 10 minutes. And I was freaking out, screaming. And then, you know, after a while, like towards the last 2 or 3 minutes, I started understanding, oh, the snake, why did it build this so much in my mind? Like, it's so sweet. It's nice. Like, I've only had these images of like Anaconda, you know, with J-Lo in it, that have fed me to be afraid of snakes, but really they're super sweet. It's not a pet that I'm going to own, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. Like, it's changed my perception on a concept of death, right? Because if my concept of snakes came from being a kid watching the movie Anaconda with J-Lo in it, you know, then I naturally formulated all snakes with death, or all snakes are going to eat me, right? And the moment I chose to hold on to that snake on my arm and say like, oh, I'm gonna do this, oh my God, and then I let it like desensitize me, I literally looked at death in the eye in that moment, and I was like, wait, not all snakes equal death. Boof, transcended, or I let that idea die. That idea of death die in that moment, and transcended to another level. So then my perception changed altogether, and I was able to understand, whoa, like, that fear was so much bigger in my mind instead of what it actually was supposed to be in general, right? So it's one of those things that I really want to leave you like thinking about, is like how you can force yourself to transcend death at any given moment if you choose to. Don't let it come to you. Choose to like transcend it. Always responsibly, you know what I mean? Like, don't go diving into the ocean with a bunch of sharks without a trained professional, you know what I mean? Like, do your work where you can have a controlled, safe environment. And then when you do have that, like, challenge yourself. That's how you're going to reprogram your subconscious mind, your shadow, your inner child, and you're going to start manifesting. Because I can swear to you, the moment I held on to that snake and I was like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, this is so much dumb. My brain expanded. My concepts of, like, what is fear expanded. When I came to realize, like, okay, well, I did that skydive. Wow, I can't believe that I was willing to, like, in that moment, let go of my life to have that experience. And I was so present in that moment because those were the last seconds of my life. I've been able to be like, oh, okay, like, you know, that's what it means to be in the present moment and like absorb everything that's happening and be something other than what Excel has always been, you know? And it's been powerful, and I test myself with that all the time. I let things about me die all the time, and I embrace it as a transformation. It is through time, or like through my training, that I've learned that at first death seemed kind of scary, and there was always a natural resistance because like the human condition doesn't want to die. Like, you have all these sub programs that tell you what death is supposed to be and that death should be avoided, right? But if you avoid death, then you avoid growth in general. Like, you can't have growth without death. Like, that's a natural process of Mother Earth. So like, you have to look at all alchemy as nature, all states of existence as nature, all states of existence as your consciousness. You know, you have thoughts that move, right? That are like water. You have thoughts that ground you, that are like earth. You have thoughts that make you go into a million other thoughts, like air. You have thoughts that are fiery, that make you sexual or more sexy with yourself. You know, there's a lot of expansion in your own consciousness if you embrace the natures of reality. And one of those natures is like, to grow, you always have to have some level of death. Always. To create something always has to die. And we know through like linear science from the third dimension that no energy is ever lost. It's only ever changed. So what is death? It is change. Embrace that, control it in every aspect, and then you have become a shaman that can perpetually guide themselves forward to empowerment and ascension. Sending you out of my love. Check out the description below for some really cool resources, and I will see you in the next episode. Subscribe, comment, share.